Welcome, seekers of truth and wisdom. Today, we're going to explore a profound and often misunderstood aspect of our spiritual lives: the differences between God's voice and our own thoughts. This is a journey that will take us deep into the recesses of our minds and souls, challenging our perceptions and expanding our understanding of the divine. Let's begin by acknowledging that discerning God's voice from our own thoughts is no simple task. It's a skill that requires patience, practice, and a willingness to look beyond the surface of our consciousness. Many of us have experienced moments when we felt a sudden inspiration or a powerful urge to take a certain action. We might have wondered, was that God speaking to me or just my own imagination? The truth is, there's no easy answer to this question. The line between divine guidance and our own inner dialogue can often be blurry. But fear not, for we're about to unravel this mystery together, piece by piece. First, let's consider the nature of God's voice. When we speak of God's voice, we're not necessarily referring to an audible sound that we hear with our ears. Rather, it's often described as an inner knowing, a profound sense of clarity, or a sudden insight that seems to come from beyond ourselves. It's a communication that transcends language and speaks directly to our souls. Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons. On the other hand, our thoughts are the constant stream of internal chatter that fills our minds throughout the day. They're influenced by our experiences, beliefs, fears, and desires. Our thoughts can be fleeting and changeable, often driven by our emotions and immediate circumstances. So how do we distinguish between the two? One key difference lies in the quality of the communication. God's voice often carries a sense of peace, even when it's guiding us toward challenging actions. It doesn't induce fear or anxiety, but rather a deep sense of rightness and purpose. Our own thoughts, however, can be fraught with worry, doubt, and second-guessing. Consider a moment when you felt called to help someone in need, despite personal inconvenience. If this urge was accompanied by a sense of clarity and purpose, even in the face of potential difficulties, it might have been God's voice guiding you. On the other hand, if the thought was immediately followed by a parade of worries about how helping might impact your schedule or finances, that was likely your own mind chattering away. Another crucial distinction is the origin of the message. God's voice often comes unbidden, surprising us with its wisdom and insight. It may challenge our preconceptions and push us beyond our comfort zones. Our own thoughts, however, tend to follow familiar patterns and often reinforce our existing beliefs and biases. For instance, have you ever had a sudden realization that completely shifted your perspective on a long-standing issue? That moment of clarity, which seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, could well have been God's voice breaking through the noise of your usual thought patterns. It's also worth noting that God's voice tends to align with universal truths and principles of love, compassion, and justice. While our own thoughts can certainly reflect these values, they can also be tainted by selfishness, prejudice, or narrow-mindedness. If you receive an internal message that urges you to act with kindness and forgiveness, even towards someone who has wronged you, that's more likely to be God's voice than your own natural inclination. However, this doesn't mean that every altruistic thought is necessarily God speaking to us. Our minds are capable of generating noble ideas and selfless impulses. The key is to look at the broader context and the fruits of these thoughts. God's voice tends to lead us toward personal growth, spiritual maturity, and a deeper connection with both the divine and our fellow human beings. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on this. When was the last time you felt a strong inner prompting that led you to step outside your comfort zone for the benefit of others? How did it feel? What was the outcome? This kind of reflection can help us become more attuned to the subtle ways God might be speaking to us. As we continue our exploration, it's important to recognize that discerning God's voice is not about achieving perfect certainty. Even the most spiritually mature individuals sometimes struggle to distinguish between divine guidance and their own thoughts. The key is to approach this process with humility, openness, and a willingness to learn and grow. One practical way to sharpen our ability to hear God's voice is through regular spiritual practices such as meditation, prayer, or contemplative reading. These practices help quiet the constant chatter of our minds, creating space for divine communication to emerge. They also help us become more familiar with the tone or feel of God's voice, making it easier to recognize in our daily lives. Another important aspect to consider is the role of community in discerning God's voice. While our connection with the divine is deeply personal, we don't have to navigate it alone. Trusted spiritual friends, mentors, or religious leaders can offer valuable perspectives and help us sort through our experiences. They can provide a sounding board for our insights and help us recognize patterns or blind spots in our thinking. However, it's crucial to maintain a balance between seeking guidance from others and trusting our own inner experiences. No one else can fully know or interpret our personal relationship with the divine. While external input can be valuable, the ultimate discernment must come from within. As we delve deeper into this topic, we must also address the elephant in the room. What about when we think we're hearing God's voice, but the message seems harmful or contrary to our understanding of divine love? This is where discernment becomes absolutely critical. God's voice will never lead us to harm ourselves or others. It will never contradict the fundamental principles of love, justice, and compassion that are at the core of divine nature. If you're receiving messages that urge you to act in ways that are destructive or unethical, that's not God speaking. It's either your own mind or potentially harmful external influences. This brings us to an important point. The process of discerning God's voice is not just about distinguishing it from our own thoughts, but also from other external voices that might be influencing us. These could include societal pressures, the expectations of others, or even manipulative individuals or groups claiming to speak for God. True divine communication empowers us to become our best selves and to act with love and integrity in the world. It doesn't seek to control or diminish us, but rather to help us grow and flourish. If a supposed message from God makes you feel small, worthless, or trapped, that's a red flag that it's not actually coming from the divine. Let's take a moment to really let that sink in. God's voice is life-giving, not life-draining. It builds up, it doesn't tear down. It liberates, it doesn't constrain. How does this understanding change the way you view your own inner experiences? As we conclude this first part of our exploration, I want to emphasize that learning to discern God's voice is a lifelong journey. It's not about achieving perfection, but about growing in awareness and sensitivity to the divine presence in our lives. Each of us will have our own unique experiences and challenges in this process. Remember, the goal is not to hear God's voice perfectly all the time, but to cultivate a deeper, more authentic relationship with the divine. This relationship is built on trust, openness, and a willingness to listen, not just in moments of crisis or decision-making, but in the everyday rhythms of our lives. In the next part of our discussion, we'll delve into more specific techniques for enhancing our ability to discern God's voice, as well as explore some of the common obstacles that can get in our way. Until then, I encourage you to pay close attention to your inner world. Notice the different qualities of your thoughts and impressions. Be curious about where they might be coming from. And above all, remain open to the possibility of divine communication in unexpected places and ways. One powerful approach is to develop a practice of inner stillness. In our fast-paced world, our minds are constantly bombarded with information, stimuli, and distractions. This mental noise can make it incredibly difficult to hear the subtle whispers of divine guidance. By intentionally creating periods of silence and stillness in our lives, we create space for God's voice to emerge. This doesn't necessarily mean sitting in meditation for hours on end, though that can certainly be beneficial for some. It might involve taking a few minutes each day to simply breathe and be present without trying to accomplish anything or solve any problems. It could mean going for a quiet walk in nature, or sitting in a sacred space without any agenda other than to be open to divine presence. During these times of stillness, pay attention to what arises in your consciousness. You might notice that your own thoughts initially become louder as your mind resists the quiet. This is normal. Simply observe these thoughts without judgment and allow them to pass. As you practice this regularly, you may find that a deeper level of awareness begins to emerge, one that's less cluttered by your usual mental chatter. It's in this space of inner quiet that we often become more attuned to God's voice. You might experience it as a sudden insight, a feeling of peace, or a gentle nudge in a certain direction. The key is to approach these experiences with an attitude of receptivity and curiosity, rather than trying to force or control them. Another crucial aspect of discerning God's voice is developing a deep familiarity with divine character and principles. This doesn't mean adhering rigidly to religious dogma, but rather cultivating a genuine understanding of the nature of love, compassion, justice, and truth that are often associated with the divine. We can do this through studying spiritual texts, engaging in thoughtful discussions with others on our spiritual path, and most importantly, by paying attention to our own experiences of divine love and wisdom in our lives. As we become more attuned to these qualities, we'll be better equipped to recognize when a thought or impulse aligns with them, and when it doesn't. For example, if you have a sudden urge to reach out to someone you've been in conflict with, and this impulse is accompanied by feelings of compassion and a desire for reconciliation, it's more likely to be aligned with God's voice. On the other hand, if the thought of contacting this person is driven by a desire to prove them wrong or assert your superiority, that's probably coming from your own ego rather than divine guidance. It's also important to recognize that God's voice often speaks to us through our experiences and relationships. Sometimes, a conversation with a friend, a line from a book, or even a challenging situation can be the vehicle for divine communication. The key is to remain open and attentive to these possibilities. This doesn't mean that every random thought or external input is a message from God. Rather, it's about developing a sensitivity to those moments when something resonates deeply with our spirit, challenging us to grow or see things from a new perspective. Let's consider a practical example. Imagine you're grappling with a difficult decision about your career. You've been feeling unfulfilled in your current job, but you're unsure about taking the risk of changing paths. One day, while having coffee with a friend, They share a story about how they took a leap of faith in their own career and how it led to unexpected growth and opportunities. As you listen to their story, you feel a sense of resonance and excitement. You might even experience physical sensations like goosebumps or a flutter in your chest. This could be a moment of divine communication, using your friend's experience to speak to your own situation. However, it's crucial to note that this doesn't necessarily mean God is telling you to quit your job immediately. Rather, it might be an invitation to explore your feelings of dissatisfaction more deeply, to consider what truly brings you fulfillment, and to be open to new possibilities. The divine often guides us by opening doors and inviting us to step through them, rather than pushing us through. Another key difference between God's voice and our own thoughts lies in the realm of timing. Our thoughts often push us towards immediate action or quick solutions. We want to resolve our discomfort or uncertainty as quickly as possible. God's timing, however, often operates on a different scale. Divine guidance might call us to wait, to be patient, to allow things to unfold in their own time. This can be challenging for us, especially in a culture that values instant gratification. But there's often deep wisdom in this divine timing, allowing for necessary growth and preparation before we take significant steps. For instance, you might feel a strong calling to embark on a particular path or project. Your own thoughts might urge you to jump in immediately, to start making plans and taking action. But if this impulse is coming from God, you might also sense a need for preparation, for deepening your understanding or developing certain skills first. There might be a feeling of not yet, but soon that accompanies the calling. Learning to discern and trust in divine timing is a crucial skill in distinguishing God's voice from our own impatient thoughts. It requires us to cultivate patience and faith, trusting that things will unfold as they should, even when we can't see the whole picture. This brings us to another important point. God's voice often provides us with just enough information for the next step, rather than laying out the entire journey. Our own thoughts, driven by our desire for control and certainty, often want to see the whole path before we take a single step. But divine guidance often operates on a need-to-know basis, revealing things to us as we're ready to receive them. This can be frustrating for our logical minds, which want to have everything figured out in advance. But there's profound wisdom in this approach. It keeps us humble, dependent on ongoing divine guidance rather than thinking we can map out our entire spiritual journey on our own. It also allows for the element of surprise and wonder in our spiritual lives, as we remain open to unexpected twists and turns in our path. Consider the great spiritual leaders and mystics throughout history. Many of them embarked on their journeys without a clear roadmap, guided by an inner calling that revealed itself step by step. They had to trust in the process, remaining open and responsive to divine guidance as it unfolded. This doesn't mean we shouldn't plan or use our rational faculties, but it does suggest that when it comes to the deepest matters of our spiritual lives, we need to balance our planning with a willingness to trust in divine guidance, even when we can't see the whole picture. As we near the end of this second part of our exploration, let's reflect on a profound question. How might our lives change if we truly trusted in divine guidance? If we were able to consistently discern God's voice from our own thoughts, how would it affect our decisions, our relationships, our sense of purpose? This isn't a question with easy answers, but it's one worth sitting with. It invites us to imagine a life lived in deeper alignment with divine wisdom, where we're able to navigate the complexities of our existence with a sense of guidance and purpose. In our next section, we'll explore some of the common obstacles that can hinder our ability to discern God's voice, as well as strategies for overcoming them. We'll also delve into the role of community in this process and how we can support each other in our spiritual discernment. Until then, I encourage you to continue paying attention to your inner world, to the subtle promptings and insights that arise in moments of quietude. Remember, the divine speaks in whispers as well as thunders, and learning to discern that voice is a lifelong journey of growth and discovery.